Like most great things, there's a backstory to how they came to be. Some of our favorite shows and films didn't start how they ended, nor did the behind the scenes match what viewers saw. Sanford and Son would be one of those examples of how things appeared to many as a great success, only to have disputes and fallouts on the back end. In 1972, the groundbreaking show would introduce America to Red Fox and his TV son, Damon Wilson. The show would shed light on life in Black America and a father and son duo in South Central Los Angeles. With Jim Crow laws only ending less than 10 years before its airing, it should be no surprise that Red Fox and the rest of his co-stars would struggle with finding equality when it came to the level of star power they brought. Here's why Red Fox left Sanford and Son. Sanford and Son is based off a BBC sitcom called Steptoe and Son. Steptoe and Son was a British sitcom that featured father Albert Steptoe and his son Harold. The two often got into comedic disagreements based off the fact that they're from different generations. The creators of All in the Family, Norman Lear and Bud Yorkin, developed the show for American audiences. Originally, the show was going to star Italians, but after having trouble finding the right cast, they decided to go with a black family instead. While developing the show, Bud Yorkin said he wasn't able to sell the show to CBS, who was broadcasting All in the Family at the time. According to then president of CBS, Fred Silverman, it was one of the stupidest things I did at CBS. We had All in the Family on the air, and Bud and Norman came to me with the idea, and it was called Steptoe and Son. They failed to mention that Red Fox was on it, or that it was going to be a black show. It's hard to imagine anyone besides Red Fox in the role of Fred Sanford, but that's exactly what almost happened. Actor Cleavon Little was first approached for the lead role. Little had to decline the role due to prior commitments. He would go on to suggest Foxx for the lead because previously they both worked in the 1970 film Cotton Comes to Harlem. NBC wasn't sold on the idea with Foxx in the lead role because of his raunchy stand-up act. However, during a test screening, Foxx gave a hysterical performance that included him faking a heart attack, which became a running gag on the show. NBC wasn't the only ones who had reservations about the show. The lead actors themselves, Red Fox and Damon Wilson, also weren't sure that the show would last. I thought about it long and hard and decided to take a chance. Red and I thought we could grab some quick cash plus notoriety, then move on to the next project. When talking about the chemistry between Foxx and Wilson, TV editor Michael Seth Starr said, "Red and Damon walked in front of cameras and did their scene together. It had been only 4 days since they met for the first time at Red's house in Las Vegas. The All in the Family cast fell on the floor. I have never heard guys laughing like that. It went on and on." Foxx was highly influential in the building of Sanford and Son. Foxx got LaWanda Page, who would play Aunt Esther, on the show. Foxx and Page go all the way back to their days of just starting out in comedy. Once Foxx knew he had the starring role in Sanford and Son, he suggested Page for the role of Aunt Esther. At the time, Page stepped away from comedy to take care of her mother. Page had moved from LA back to where she grew up in St. Louis. While filming, producers noticed that Page had trouble on set and was unfamiliar with how television was produced. One of the producers informed Foxx that he was going to have to fire Page and restart auditions for Aunt Esther. Foxx insisted that LaWanda play the part and even threatened to walk away from the show if she was fired. As a result, the producers decided to keep Page, who eventually became one of the most memorable characters on the show. At the height of its success, Sanford and Son would peak as the number 2 show during its second season and fourth season. Around this time, audiences were falling in love with the Brady Bunch. But when Sanford and Son hit the screen, it was clear that people wanted to hear what Fred G. Sanford and his son had to say. It is reported that Sanford and Son was the reason why the Brady Bunch would eventually get pulled from ABC in 1974. Behind the scenes, Sanford and Son would become known as the show that killed the Brady Bunch by appearing in the Friday night lineup, middling the audiences. It is reported that Red Fox's salary would peak to $25,000 per half-hour episode. He would own 3 large homes, a cosmetic factory, beauty salon, a $50,000 Rolls Royce, and a $27,000 British Roadster. However, during the show's third season, Foxx walked off the show due to a salary dispute. There are reports that say that Foxx was getting $6,000 per episode at the time, but the salary was then increased to $25,000. Because of the show's high ratings, Foxx felt he deserved more and didn't return to set. The character of Fred Sanford was written out for the rest of the season. In 1974, Jet magazine reported that Foxx was hit with a $10 million lawsuit from Tandem Productions, the company that produced the show. According to them, Foxx failed to show up to start taping the new season. Damon Wilson was also hit with a lawsuit by the production company for failure to report to work out of solidarity for Foxx. In addition to not showing up for work, Foxx also made several demands while on set. The network agreed to supply Foxx with a rehearsal hall with windows. His old rehearsal hall was too confining. In addition to his dressing room changes, Foxx also asked for a pay raise and a percentage of the show. I asked for 25% of the show. They wanted to give me 25% of the producer's pie and said it would take 5 years before I could get a piece of the show. Well, they want to make me look like an idiot. They know I have a winner, and I had one from the start. You see, when they gave me the show, they had about 25 million black folks to start off with as a viewing audience. The show has made millions. They wanted to sell the show to Columbia for $11 million. When the show is syndicated, I want to have a piece of it. I figured that if I had 25% of the show, I could make $1 million a year for the next 10 or 12 years. Foxx defended his demands by stating he's been in show business for 38 years and he still gets treated like a beginner. Foxx wasn't the only one who felt he was being mistreated by the network. According to Damon Wilson's memoir, Second Banana, the bittersweet memoir of the Sanford and Son years, he said, "We were breaking ground, we were making history, but when we first came to NBC, we didn't even have dressing rooms, except on a shoot day. We were dressing in the men's room when our first show aired. Red and I were making history, and they tried to deal with us like we were third-class field hands." The show took a huge mental toll on Foxx. When he was written out of the show at the end of the third season, he blamed the mental and physical efforts of being on a weekly series. According to People magazine, Foxx said he was taken to the hospital 4 or 5 times. The show also affected Foxx's personal life. "When I went to Hollywood, I didn't have time to spend with her like I did in Vegas," Foxx commented about his then ex-wife. "I did 2 45-minute shows and we always had time to go out after, or we could go to the movies or horseback riding. In Hollywood, I spent all my time reading scripts, working 8 hours a day, 7 days a week. When I came home, I just went to sleep." The network, however, thought otherwise. They thought Foxx was childish and wasn't able to deal with his instant superstardom. With tensions continuing to rise, Foxx eventually showed up to the studio with a pearl-handled revolver. Fox and NBC, however, would eventually come to an agreement, and the show would continue for another 3 seasons. When it came down to the show's 6th season, Foxx ultimately was ready to move on, and ABC looked to have figured out a way to begin working with the Comedy King. According to the New York Times, Foxx would get an offer from ABC that would include his own variety show and a lucrative contract. Some would go on to label Foxx as the Black Barbara Walters over the move. "I wasn't stolen. I floated. Just floated away on a lake of bewilderment. I was just fed up. I never had a chance to do a special at NBC. I never got a chance to host the Tonight Show like everybody else in the business. I asked for a chance to produce, but they wouldn't let me. I wanted to grow, but they wouldn't let me. Don't you know many black youngsters watch me every week and know I should win something? They're not idiots. Those kids know Sanford or Red Fox hasn't won anything. A whole nation of black people keeps watching for a hero and none comes, man. It would take their minds off a whole lot of things if you give them some winners. We were the #1 show at NBC for 6 years, and you think that they would nominate us. Can you believe it? The whole thing ought to be investigated. I don't mean just Sanford and Son. What about the other black shows like The Jeffersons, That's My Mama, and Good Times? Never a mention of them at the Emmys. Unfortunately for Fox, his variety show, The Red Fox Show with ABC, will only last 13 episodes in just 1 season. Meanwhile, back at NBC, executives look to keep things going with a series of spin-offs of Sanford and Son. In 1975, Grady would make his debut, as it would tell the story of the show's character, Grady, played by actor Whitman Mayo. When Sanford and Son would officially end in 1977, the network would push ahead without Red Fox and his TV son Demond Wilson for the show Sanford Arms, where Phil Wheeler moved into Fred and Lamont's house after the two moved to Arizona. Phil and his two teenage children attempted to turn the rooming house next door into a successful hotel. Grady, Bubba, and Esther also appeared on the show. However, the show would only last for 4 episodes. In 1980, looking to push their past differences aside, Fox would re-team back up with NBC for Sanford. It's unclear for how much his salary was at the time. Even though Fox was on board to return, the same could not be said about Wilson, who would end up refusing to return. According to Wilson, he would take issue with Fox for not telling him that he was previously leaving the show, and the two wouldn't speak. I saw Red Fox once before he died, circa 1983, and I never saw him again. At the time, I was playing tennis at the Malibu Racket Club, and I was approached by some producers about doing a Red Fox 50th anniversary special. I hadn't spoken to him since 1977, and I called the club where Red was, and we met at Red's office, but he was less than affable. I told those guys it was a bad idea. I never had to cross words with him. People say I'm protective of Red Fox in my book. I had no animosity toward Fox for quitting the show in 1977 because I had a $1 million contract at CBS to do Baby I'm Back. My hurt was that he didn't come to me about throwing the towel in. I found out in the hallway at NBC from a newscaster. I forgave him and I loved Red, but I never forgot that. The love was there. You can watch any episode and see that. Fox would end up passing years later in 1991, and despite fighting for what he felt he was owed, the comedy legend would die with his fortune in the negative. Sanford and Son would have some questionable moments behind the scenes with his star, but would ultimately align with Fox's passion to highlight black accomplishments. My biggest dream is to establish a shrine, a museum of black accomplishment. It'll show what blacks in all walks of life have done throughout the history of the country. Jackie Robinson, Nat King Cole, Ralph Bunche. Young people need to know all that, so their parents can't poison their minds that are lazy and shiftless and never did nothing, and blah blah blah, and are good for picking cotton. Black kids need it, but white kids need it too. They need it more, because they're the ones that are going to have to bring down this prejudice. The white kids need it so they can say, Mom, you're wrong. You know who invented the blood plasma that saved Uncle Willie? A black man. The same kind of thing happens in show business. When 20 years from now, they mention the Emmys, my name won't be among the guys who had something to do with American comedy. It means that I'm eliminated from history of my own profession. I didn't do nothing. It's like I wasn't there.